You can do all of the things that you think are the right things, all of the things that you think are helpful, and it still may not turn out the way that you want. There may still be loss, there may still be tragedy, but what I do have control over is my perspective. So I can still have hope. I can still support my daughter. I can give her the space that she needs to be able to make choices and know that I have confidence in her to make those choices.
Hello and warm welcome to The Stories We Tell. I'm Nithya Shanti, a teacher and facilitator of conscious living here at Round Glass. On this show, we share the gift of illuminating stories. Each week, you'll hear a life story from me and a special guest on a universal theme. Stories of self-acceptance, overcoming inconceivable odds, embracing change, and recognizing our limitless nature while honoring our humanity. It's natural to want to feel a sense of control over your life and the things around you. Being out of control can be scary. Even the term out of control is used to describe a negative situation. But when we tighten our grip on the people and situations around it, things will start to slip through our fingers and show us that sometimes we cannot control the world around us. How can we make peace with the idea that we can't control everything? In my experience, this came to me through meditation, where my initial idea of meditation was it's about controlling the mind. And my first recognition was just how out of control my mind actually is. It's all over the place. And that was actually very frightening, to realize that I can't even keep my mind on a simple meditation object like my breath for even a minute. Even that much, my mind starts to wander. And in the course of my first meditation course, so many emotions came up, so many memories came up, so many fears came up. And I just felt helpless. I just couldn't do anything much to stop this barrage of thoughts and emotions. I remember sometime I'd sit to meditate, I'd get a pain in my head before I'd even start. It's coming from all that inner tension and wanting to control. And it was only later, slowly going forward, getting guidance from my teachers, and little by little letting go, that I learned that it's not so much about control. It's actually about observing. It's about witnessing. It's about allowing. It's about acknowledging what's going on, at the same time, not being captive to it. So, as that capacity grew within me, the capacity to allow and witness and not have such strong preferences about how things should be, that's when I, for the first time, began to get a true taste of the joy and the beauty of meditation. I was recently reading a book which talked about 4 steps about how we can actually work with our pain body, our inner unprocessed emotions. And it said the 4 steps are acknowledge whatever is going on. And then acknowledge it not only in your thinking, but also in your feelings. Acknowledge this is what's happening right now. For example, I'm feeling sad right now. And then allow, which is the opposite of control. Instead of trying to fix it, change it, improve it, you allow it. And allow it means to give it some space to play itself out. And then open. Open means to the image of a flower opening itself to the sun. So you actually open yourself. Not only do you allow it in a passive way, you actually open to it. What is this in my life that's showing up right now? You get really curious and you actually allow it to blossom and show what it's really got. Maybe it has some gifts for you. And finally you enter. And by enter, the separation, the sense of I'm here and that is there. We actually touch it. And we have, even for a moment, we have a sense of oneness with it. In that moment, it's not me witnessing my life or me having a life. It's just life. And life has an intelligence of its own. And I found that very much in alignment. That 4-step teaching was very much in alignment with what I, over the years, figured out by myself. So often when I teach meditation, people say, oh, I can't control my mind. I can't control my thoughts. I say, yeah, that's exactly it. You can't. And we're not here to control it. We're here to observe it. We're here to witness it. We're here to appreciate it. We're here to not judge it. And in that process, automatically, there is a sense of harmonization and clarity, and you can call it a higher consciousness which starts to operate. And today we have a special guest. We have Tamu Lewis. When tragedy struck, Tamu was forced to re-examine her life and the things she could and couldn't control. Tamu had to shift her priorities. She has since founded the Positively Empowered Academy in the name of her brother, who she lost to suicide. It is this work that has given her meaning and brings her hope to empower parents and destigmatize the conversation around the topic of mental health. Tamu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nithya, for having me. It's an honor to be here and share with you all.
And this topic of mental health, and especially this sense of control, lack of control, that our life is spinning out of control, we can't control things. I'd love for you to share with our audience some experience that is relevant to this.
Yes. So as you mentioned, I've been working in the mental health space since 2014 after losing my brother to suicide in 2013. So I'm the big sister and always felt as if I was his protector and would always try to support and offer comfort, offer encouragement when he would call, when he would have the feeling that he was feeling out of balance, and I would try to be there. So in some regards, I felt like I was having some control over the situation in that I could go and make him feel better from my perspective, right? So then losing him to suicide felt very out of control to me. I myself, just in terms of my personality, I am a very detail-oriented, organized person. I plan things out, right? So because I'm planning so that I can almost control what happens so that I'm minimizing the unknown.
Right.
So through this experience of losing my brother, and then fast forward some years, ended up dealing with my oldest daughter. My daughter has bipolar disorder, which is the same thing that my brother was diagnosed with. So then having to deal with it as a parent versus as a sibling, that's a whole different level of feeling the need to control sort of like an outcome for our children. I think that's natural for all parents, and we're trying to be proactive and minimize any struggle that they might have. And me, I'm thinking, okay, when you add 1 + 2, you get 3. So I'm going to do this for her, and I'm going to do that for her, and this is going to make everything fine. But that's not the case. So the lesson that I have learned, and at times it was a painful lesson, is that I really don't have control over another person, even if that person is my child. I have control over my response to situations, my preparedness, right? So going through the experience with my brother, I do feel like it prepared me in a way to be able to have some frame of reference once my daughter was diagnosed and began to have some mental health challenges. It also gave me the frame of reference of you can do all of the things that you think are the right things, all of the things that you think are helpful, and it still may not turn out the way that you want. There may still be loss. There may still be tragedy. But what I do have control over is my perspective. So I can still have hope. I can still support my daughter. I can give her the space that she needs to be able to make choices and know that I have confidence in her to make those choices. So I can pour love into her, support, provide resources, um, provide exposure to other trusted adults, other ways of support, other practices such as meditation, yoga, different activities that kind of promote mindfulness. I can do all of those things, which are helpful. And then she has those tools in her toolbox. She can learn better from the choices that she makes when they're her choices versus what mom told her to do.
So this is like a PhD lesson in letting go of control.
Yes, absolutely. That is correct. That is correct.
How did you approach your daughter's diagnosis differently than your brother's? And what lessons have you learned along the way, more specifically?
I really had to come to terms with the fact that the unthinkable could happen. So I could have the best of intentions, and because I lost my brother to suicide, I already know that that can happen versus another parent who, may not have gone through that with a sibling or another loved one. And so there might be some level of denial of the severity of the challenges that they go through. But because I went through it with my brother, so I know that that's a possible outcome. And I think that informed the way that I approached my daughter and the types of support that I tried to provide. And with teenagers is different than an adult, right? Because you have their hormones and they're still developing. I was very intentional along with my husband in trying to provide different types of support and different trusted adults. I did feel like I was somehow being punished, right? Because I had been through this experience with my brother, and now I turn around and my daughter has this same diagnosis. And so, I was kind of thinking, like, what is this, right? But of course, it's not about me. Life happens, and there's millions of people dealing with various mental illnesses. So, that didn't matter that I felt like I was being beat down. I had to get myself together and keep going. And just really, the thing that I tell parents, you really want to do the best that you can. And you also want to be sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're getting support for yourself, because then that actually allows you to show up better for your children. And that's a hard lesson for most parents and moms in particular, because we want to just give, but we really have to take care of ourselves. And that's where I found strength when I really began to speak out and find other parents who were dealing with similar situations.
Wow. I saw a picture yesterday of someone had shared the low battery indicator for a phone. And they said that you wouldn't let your phone get to that place. You'd always charge it. So why do you let yourself get to that place?
Oh, that's great. I like that.
Yeah. We always are very careful. Our phone shouldn't come to the lowest level of, charge. So we always keep it charging it. So we also got to keep charging ourselves. And one thing that you said is very much in alignment with Indian philosophy, especially the spiritual book, the Gita, which talks about nishkam karam, which means you do things to the best of your ability, but you don't get hung up on the outcomes. And I found it really powerful when you said that, I had to come to terms with the fact that this could actually go there. This is the way the disease is, and it can actually happen. And by coming to terms with it and not getting hung up on that should never happen, that I definitely want to control that. In a way, you've been able to show up more completely, and you've been able to show up, do your best, offer her the tools, offer her the resources, and know that at the end of the day, it's not in your hands. And you can take care of yourself and you can do the best for your child. And of course, you're doing so much more than that, as we'll talk about in a bit. So I just find that you've kind of stumbled upon a very ancient teaching, a timeless teaching, and I can see how that's helped you grow as a person, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. And being present. When you were talking, that made me think about just being mindful and being present, because I used to try to figure out like when the next shoe was going to drop. So if she was having a good day, I would be worried about, is this going to change in the next minute, or is tomorrow going to be horrible? Is she not going to be able to get out of bed tomorrow? Instead of appreciating the good day. And so now I really try to focus on being mindful and being present. And if today is okay, I'm good with that.
And you're making me reflect on my work, because I'm a spiritual teacher and I share various things, and I often get feedback from people sharing pretty deep experiences, transformational experiences, shifts in their being. And listening to you, I had a sense that I know I'm not doing it for that, but how powerful to continue doing what I'm doing, even if I didn't get that kind of feedback. Because at some subtle level, that is reinforcing and that is encouraging. And I'm getting the sense that, you just keep doing what you're doing. You keep taking care of yourself. You be true to yourself. You do the practices that support you. And you share with others what you think might be beneficial, helpful, without getting too caught up in the outcome. And whether or not people have instant shifts, or some people take a very long time to have any kind of a shift, that we just keep showing up and doing our best. And that's the kind of inspiration I got listening to you right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that for sure, because I think that's what it's about.
I want to ask you a little more about your brother, if that's all right, because
Sure.
you said that you've mentioned earlier that it's not like he didn't have any help at all. He was seeing a psychiatrist.
Right.
At the same time, there's a stigma around bipolar disorder, and especially that, we haven't mentioned it yet, but your brother was fairly well known. He was in Hollywood.
Right.
And he was perhaps concerned that this would impact his career if he talked about it openly. So someone who they were getting help, at the same time they were not getting the community's support, because in a way they had to hide it from the community. So if you can say a little bit more about that.
Yes, absolutely. So my brother was actor Lee Thompson Young, and he had been in multiple TV shows and movies, and he was actually filming Rizzoli and Isles, a TV show on TNT at the time, in his fourth season of filming that show. And although he was seeing a psychiatrist, my mom and I were aware of his diagnosis, but that was about it. And so he had friends and coworkers in LA who did not know. And I feel like if they had known the diagnosis, then they may have noticed signs. Now, one thing that I point out is that because he was a very talented actor, I think he spent a lot of his energy masking his pain from the illness. However,
Wow.
if you're working with someone every day, or you're their friend and you're hanging out on a regular basis, you might notice some small shift. And if you had the context of knowing about the bipolar disorder diagnosis, then you might respond differently. That is one of the main reasons that my mom and I started the Lee Thompson Young Foundation shortly after he passed, to promote that mental health education and to destigmatize the conversation. Because I think, too, sometimes those who are trying to manage the mental illness, sometimes they might not give us the credit. They might not give their loved ones and their friends enough credit to know that we would understand. And if we don't, we can become educated. And they can also tell us what support looks like for them. So that's something that I learned and began to do as my daughter got older. You know what? I know what my idea is, or what I think might be helpful, but why don't you tell me? What would be helpful for me to do if I notice these things in you, or if you call me or we talk and you tell me that you're feeling down emotionally, what might support look like, so that I'll know when that situation comes up.
That's really, really empowering, because that's a really powerful way to let them know that you're there for them and you're coachable. I mean, yes, you may not know what it's like to be them, but help me understand how I can love you. Help me understand how I can support you. Help me understand how I can be there for you. I was listening to a show yesterday about domestic violence, and the author said something very simple, but I found it quite powerful. She said that if you're at work and you ask someone, hey, how's it going? And they say, it's not so good at home. So then sometimes people don't know how to take it further from that. Okay, it's not so good at home. So then you just repeat the question. You repeat those words. It's not good at home, question mark, and you give them a chance to go deeper into it, as opposed to just getting uncomfortable, not knowing, kind of freezing. So I found it very, very skillful that someone says something, and maybe like, for example, oh, they're feeling tired. So, oh, you're feeling tired? And you're giving them a chance to go deeper and maybe say a little bit more about the feeling tired, that, oh, I'm emotionally drained out, or whatever it is. And that creates an opening. So I think it's really powerful what you're saying, that we ask the people themselves, we give them the space to go deeper into what they're experiencing, what they're going through. And we may not have the answers, but we can be there as a support. We can be there in understanding. We can be there in just letting them know that it's okay.
Yes, absolutely. And that made me think about, too, with my daughter. I noticed over the years that she would sometimes share the most, her deepest feelings when we're in the car. If it was just the two of us in the car, this is when she would share. And this is from the time when she was a little girl. And then as she became a teenager and began to deal with these mental health challenges, at sometimes I was trying to like pull information out of her. So I might pick her up from school and I would just start in with the questions. And the more that I would say, the less that she would say. She would just shut down or just give me one word answers. And then finally it dawned on me that I wasn't providing a safe space anymore. I was taking up all of the space. And so what I began to do is, when I would pick her up from school, I would just say, how are you? And wait, I wouldn't say anything else. And sometimes I'd turn on a little music, and it would seem like it would take a really long time, like 5 minutes, right? But probably it was only a minute or so, or maybe not even that long. And when that pause created some safe space for her, and then she would begin to tell me, and share about her day and her feelings or whatever her challenges were.
That's really helpful. I think that's also good for all of us to know that we shouldn't be in a rush to, just because we are open to listening doesn't mean the other person is ready. And just to say, okay, how are you? And just give it some time, and then it'll bubble up. They've got the invitation that I can share, but maybe they need to organize their thoughts and feelings a bit before they can express it.
Right.
What do you think, Tamu, is the most important thing we should be talking about in regards to mental health? What is a conversation that isn't being had?
Wow, that's a good question, because I do feel like the conversation is happening a lot more frequently now, even in media and with celebrities sharing, talking about depression and anxiety. I do feel like, though, it sort of stops there, where you hear people say that they're dealing with those two things. So depression and anxiety seem to be common, and people talk about that, but not so much with additional types of diagnoses or like treatment plans, like what is it that you can do. I think there's a lot more to discuss about what is it that we can really do to support, and maybe there's things outside of, or not outside of, maybe to supplement sort of the professional level of help from mental health professionals. But what sorts of things can you do in your day-to-day life as someone who's dealing with a mental illness or mental health challenges, and also as their loved ones. And that would be things like what you mentioned, Nithya, with like the meditation, the mindfulness, like different tools and techniques, yoga, different types of exercises. Maybe it's things like that.
And one more thing that I would add to what you're saying is a sense of community. You kind of mentioned it a little while back, but not just community as in the people I know, but spaces where we can just be together and we can just talk about what's going on. I began an experiment, Tamu, last year. I began sharing these sessions called Authentic Relating and Circling. And we would just gather together. 10, 15 of us would gather together for about 3 hours. And it was pretty agenda-less. We're just letting people be the way they are, and they can share as much or as little as they want. And even though that was not designed to be therapy, it was very therapeutic. And a lot of people over the months shared some really big, significant shifts that happened without getting too much into very deep. Of course, they shared stories and things, but we didn't try to fix their stories or analyze their stories. We just gave them a safe space to share what was going on with them. So I think in addition to the introspective journey of meditation, reflection, even physical exercise and yoga and things, there's a really powerful element of community coming together, which is, I think that's the reason, because you can't have psychologists, therapists, and counselors dealing with all of this. And at the most, even if you do have a therapist, you can't meet the therapist every day. You maybe meet the therapist once a week or once in 2 weeks. So that cannot be a lasting solution.
Yes, absolutely, because isolation is a big deal, right? And it can really contribute to any issues that you might be having in terms of mental health challenges. And going back to my brother, that was one of the things in that case, right? Because although he was working and he was living in a community, he was isolated in the sense of dealing with his mental illness alone outside of his psychiatrist. I do feel like the community piece is big, and I think outside of someone's immediate family, sometimes that can be more meaningful to the person, because in their minds, they might tell themselves that their family has to support them versus a group of friends or others in the community where they feel like they have a choice and they still want to support me, right? So I think that community is big, and we do, through the foundation, try to cultivate some of that. So we offer webinars, or we call them master classes, where we talk about cultivating emotional well-being, and we have groups where we talk to moms. So we're trying to kind of create this community where people can share resources and just be there, like you said, not necessarily trying to fix anything, but just sharing the story, so you have that sense of someone else can relate to what you're going through.
I was looking up your brother, and I saw news reports of how people were so taken aback and so shocked, and it was something they never expected. And I wonder if, in your experience, you can tell us, like, if we have friends who are also masking this kind of thing really well, are there any telltale signs? Are there any ways in which we can pick up on this? That how people are actually probably struggling more than they're letting on?
If there is a change in behavior, even if it's something that is positive, but it seems to be like a big shift and the person is like laser focused on it all of a sudden, that can actually be a sign. So the example with my brother was that he decided to become like a vegetarian, and it seemed like it was overnight. He was just going to all of a sudden be a vegetarian, and he was hyper focused on it. Like he like threw himself into this research. Now, meanwhile, he's an actor, right? He's going to set every day filming this show, but he just knew all this information about being a vegetarian, and he was very like stringent, and it was overnight.
Any other signs you can tell us about?
Yeah, so one thing that I like to refer to is called Know the 5 Signs. There was a campaign a few years ago that was fairly global, but it came out and it talked about knowing the 5 signs that may indicate that someone is in emotional pain and need additional help. So one of them is the personality change. One is a lack of self-care. So if the person, is typically keeps themselves up, and then all of a sudden you notice they just, maybe they look a little in shambles, or maybe it looks like they didn't comb their hair, this kind of thing, right? So we got personality change, lack of self-care, hopelessness. So if you notice that anything that you say, like nothing is comforting, and they just feel hopelessness about everything going on, that's one. Agitation. So if it seems like they now have a short fuse and they wouldn't before, and they're bothered by everything, that agitation. And then the isolation, withdrawal. So you really have to be flexible and open to the unknown, and then just continue to do the best that you can in terms of the decisions that you're making and how you are trying to support your loved one. And then if you are the person with the challenge, I think you have to have grace with yourself and know that there are going to be ups and downs, and try not to be discouraged, because I do feel like that happens with my daughter. She can be on a good path for a while, and then something happens and she may feel triggered, and then she kind of gets discouraged. But I think it's important to realize, be mindful and reflective as well, and realize that you may have felt like this before and you made it through. So kind of reflecting and reminding yourself of your wins, your resilience, what you've already been through, so that you can keep going.
That's very helpful, Tamu. You're reminding me of 3 principles which I learned from the Zen Peacemakers organization and community in the US. And they're involved in engaged spirituality and Buddhism. And their 3 principles are not knowing, bearing witness, and loving actions. And not knowing is just like you said, that just because something worked for someone doesn't mean it'll work for everyone, or even for the same person at all times. So not knowing is having that humility, having that openness. And yeah, I may have experienced a lot, I may have helped a lot of people, but I don't know if what I have will necessarily help you. So let me be open, not knowing. And bearing witnesses, again, tuning in, like you said, tuning into your daughter, tuning into just because she talks in the car doesn't mean she will always talk in the car. It's also the approach that you're bringing and the energy that you're bringing. So bearing witness is being willing to tune in to someone. How are you doing? And then waiting for them to answer and giving them that space. And then from that emerges the loving actions. And the loving actions may be different each time, but they'll come from that ground of not knowing, which is, for me, wisdom. Wisdom is above knowledge. Wisdom is infinite points of view, infinite viewing points. And not knowing, bearing witness, tuning in, connecting. And then from there, the actions emerge, which tend to be usually quite helpful.
Oh, that's great. I like that. I really like that.
Where can people find out about your various live sessions and other resources? Is that a good place to
Yes.
look up?
So you can go to my website, tamulewis.com. And I'm also Tamu Lewis on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also find it at our foundation's website as well. So that's ltyfoundation.org. So it's my brother's initials, Lee Thompson Young. Foundation.org.
Fantastic. I think it's such a rich conversation, and looks like this whole event has given your life a completely different purpose. I don't know what purpose you had earlier, but now you seem to have a really powerful focus and purpose.
That's right.
Do you sometimes feel that it's kind of taken over your life and you were doing something completely different and you've completely gone on this other track? How did that feel for you?
Yes. I do feel like it was almost like a calling. I mean, I never imagined I'd be doing anything like this, but it was almost the work called me, because I didn't want another family to go through what we went through. And even if I only touch a couple of people or help a couple of people, like that's worth it to me. And then last year I began working on a book to tell my story. So I am going through rounds of editing right now, so that would be coming out later too, to help people more. Just another way to get the story out there and provide some resources.
That's amazing. I think this is a powerful way to process grief, where we use that energy of grief and say, all right, this has happened, but how can I now support others who are going through similar things or might go through similar things? And I think it really lights one up when one uses the energy of grief in that way.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tamu.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. Tune in next week for a brand new episode of Stories We Tell. Don't forget to rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're looking for new ways to explore conscious living, then please subscribe and join me on the Round Glass Living app. In addition to this podcast, you can find courses, classes, recipes, music, and much more to help you make positive changes while doing what you love. Until next time, I'm Nithya Shanti. Goodbye.
The Stories We Tell is a part of Round Glass, holistic well-being at your fingertips. Find out more at roundglass.com.